A viewer left me a comment on Twitter that he had found a new indie FMV game that out-pretentiouses Erica. I'm an easy mark for that stuff. This game, released on Switch, PS4, and everywhere, is called I Saw Black Clouds, which is an equally viable title for that Gray Skies Not Actually a War of the Worlds game that I covered a few weeks back. The game follows a woman named Christina, whose friend Emily has just committed suicide by hanging, and judging by the opening narration, she left the most convoluted suicide note ever.
Don't follow me to where I'm going. I don't want you to go where I've been, or see the things I've seen.
Whilst rummaging through the dead girl's belongings, you find a diary. I suspect the dev was a big fan of 13 Reasons Why, and the diary implies that Emily was driven to suicide by a ghost. So you start retracing Emily's final days to investigate the ghost and uncover the truth, whilst being haunted by said ghost yourself. The game plays out as an interactive movie. Every now and then a choice for what to do next in the story pops up, with the implication that there are tons of branching paths through the narrative. You're only given a few seconds to make each decision, and sometimes the choice pops up before the in-game character has asked you the relevant question. But the game has a streaming mode where it will pause at each choice so that you can ask viewers what to do. Alright, your votes are locked in! 50% of you say go left, and 50% of you say go right! You people are no help! But at least I can play I Saw Black Clouds with a controller and buttons and not a stupid-ass app on my phone! Advantage Black Clouds! The editing on these branching paths is atrocious. The music skips about every time you make a decision, and rather than cutting away from Christina's face so the edits aren't obvious, she just warps about every time there's a cut. It's embarrassingly amateur hour. Christina herself is a complete cipher with no interesting or compelling traits, but her actress cycles through more emotions and expressions than just a derpy, pouting cryface, so again, advantage over Erica. It doesn't take long for me to start suspecting that your choices don't actually have much impact on how the game plays out. Christina reads a bit out of the dead girl's diary, and you're given the option of either going for a run or going for a drink. I opt for the run, I get a few minutes of absolutely nothing happening, and then it cuts to you going out for a drink anyway. And when you're out for drinks, you have the option of raising a toast to Emily, and if you choose not to, Christina does anyway. You're asked if you're staying in town, and if you say no, Christina says that she is anyway. Are you sure that I actually need to be here? Because the game seems to be ignoring my input and doing whatever the hell it wants. In fact, you can technically play this game without touching the controller. If you don't pick an option before time expires, the game chooses one at random, and the game plays itself. I am not kidding. Christina goes to visit a counselor for some reason, and she doesn't tell you crap about Emily, but she does give Christina a session where she imagines herself in a forest. I'm not sure that this is how therapy works, and if I miss something because I guessed wrong on going left or right, I'm gonna be pissed! You snoop around the doctor's office, and the ghost gives you an SD card of Emily's therapy, where it turns out that... Oh, so sorry. Sorry about the screen going dark like that. My Switch was trying to save power, because the game sometimes goes 10 minutes at a time without any interactive options. It's bad enough the game ignores your input, now it just flat-ass doesn't take any input.
It doesn't talk to me. She puts thoughts in my mind.
All joking aside, that whole thing of there being like a second voice in your head bringing you down, that can be true. Using that as the basis for a ghost story is a neat idea, if questionable on the grounds of taste. Christina goes to the local church to talk to the town reverend, and he tells you that the town is haunted by Agnes, the ghost of a maid from colonial times who got impregnated by her boss, rejected, and then killed herself, and now she haunts young women around the town by compelling them to suicide. I'm curious what denomination this town practices if a reverend openly preaches that a pissed-off ghost is killing people. Clearly not a religion that believes in exorcisms! So then Christina goes to the house of the Lord whose ancestor knocked up said maid, where he proceeds to retell you the entire Agnes story that we just heard from the Reverend. I'm serious, he doesn't give you any new information, just nobody on the dev team caught that we get the same several-minute exposition dump twice! Also, way to miss the point of a ghost story if everybody we meet not only believes the ghost exists, but already knows in detail exactly how it works.
They say that a soul that dies in a state of rage leaves a curse.
No! People don't say that! The Grudge movies say that! And crap, this is a stealth remake of The Grudge because you couldn't get the rights to the film franchise, isn't it? Way to make the actual Grudge game on the Wii look good by comparison. That's hard to pull off! You fart around an abandoned hospital where the ghost shows up and does nothing. Then you talk to the dad of another missing girl, and the ghost led her to an orchard that you visit, and for this bit, Christina's friend Charlotte is just hanging around with you for no apparent reason. There aren't any choices where you can avoid any of the stops on this investigation or go somewhere else. I am railroaded into doing exactly what the game wants. Screwing up with the dad and getting thrown out just leads to Christina sneaking back in and getting the information anyway. When you see the ghost, you're given the option to follow it or go back to Charlotte, and following the ghost just leads to a few seconds of jogging, and then she goes back to Charlotte anyway. This whole game is just a movie where your choices do absolutely nothing but add in or cut a few seconds of completely inconsequential footage. Why even bother making this interactive? The ghost leads you to Emily's old abandoned clinic. Charlotte disappears, and as you look for her, you find out Christina has connections to the clinic that she's forgotten. And then the ghost attacks, but doesn't actually kill you, I guess? Even though this is edited to look really hard like a death scene, you save Charlotte and get her outside. A blatant continuity error from the lazy production has Christina just abruptly generate a big head wound, but then Charlotte vanishes and Christina finally seems to lose her fudge until...
That's not really how it happened.
No. What are you doing?
I'm going to bring you out of it. It's all right. Just relax. Settle.
What?
It felt so clear.
The sedatives will do that, but it also shows that we are getting closer.
Fuck yourself! So about 80 minutes in, we find out this whole thing has been a dream. Charlotte's in therapy, the guy playing the Lord is also her therapist, in fairness, he is the best actor here, and nothing we've been following actually happened. That entire ghost storyline cuts off with no resolution, and wasn't actually important anyway because it was just some hypnosis trance bullshit. Good lord, this isn't a successor to Erica. This is a successor to the letter! How do you think you'll get away with... How do you think this is a good idea? And the killer is, a few minutes after Christina wakes up, the therapist sends her into another dream, and another storyline begins from scratch. So, like, do I need to actually give a crap about this one? In the second dream, Christina and Charlotte are attending a wedding when they get roofied and kidnapped. Charlotte is taken away to have bad things happen, and Christina finds a weapon and gets free. You're given the choice to escape or to rescue Charlotte, except trying to rescue her does this.
That's not really how it happened.
The game rewinds until you leave Charlotte to die because this second dream is what actually happened and why Christina is in therapy. Charlotte was murdered that night and Christina is racked with survivor's guilt. All of which has, carry the one, absolutely nothing to do with tracking down a ghost! Christina gets a phone call from the actually very alive Emily reassuring her. She stares at some hay and, not friggin' joking, the game ends there. So, I reiterate, what? What the hell kind of a story was that? We dicked around a crappy Grudge knockoff, barely investigating a ghost only to cut over to a completely different story before it was over? Did they just not know how to end the ghost story? Was this the plan all along? They spell out several times that the ghost is a metaphor for Christina's guilt, a dark force that compels people to kill themselves, but the ghost in the dream only attacks other people who aren't actually guilty of anything, so doesn't that metaphor kind of collapse in on itself? The two stories aren't even connected by the theme of survivor's guilt. Christina isn't responsible for or guilty over Emily's death in the dream. This whole thing just feels like a giant half-assed cop-out! And another thing, the game tracks your character traits and relationships with other characters on the pause menu. Who the actual hell is Jack? Your relationship with a guy named Jack is listed on the pause menu and ending screen, and I never ran into anybody named Jack. Wait, 1 out of 4 endings found? None of your choices impact how the story flows. How are there 3 alternate endings? Do they just end with Christina getting different ending monologues based on what personality the game arbitrarily decided that you ended up with? Oh, and back up for a minute on the ending that I did manage to get. Look at this footage for a second. Just tell me if you see anything out of the ordinary. You see that? Here, I'll play it again for you. A car in the background on the right drives forward, backs up, and then drives forward again from blatantly rewinding the footage. That's not even difficult to spot. It's the only thing on this screen that's brightly colored. They couldn't be asked to record 3 seconds of a forest without having to rewind the shot. How damn lazy was the editing job on this game? It barely has any interactivity, and what little it can be bothered to have is utter garbage. Whatever, the game is short. I guess I better go back in and look for another ending. Okay, my first run I went into the bedroom and got a pendant that never came up again. Let's just avoid the bedroom entirely. Of course, the ghost appears and gives me the diary anyway. We'll go for a drink instead of that run. Of course, it just warps forward to the drinking scene that I would have gotten anyway. Do you stay in bed or answer the door when the ghost knocks at night? Doesn't matter. If you answer the door, the ghost does nothing, and if you stay in bed, the ghost does nothing. I get to the therapist and I do everything in my power to get out of doing the stupid Mind Palace Safe Place trance crap therapy. Refusing the therapy does literally nothing except prompt the therapist to bark at you that you need to trust her. You still get forced into this meditation shit anyway. Do you spy on the therapist or check the entryway? Doesn't matter. Either way, the ghost lures you upstairs and gives you the SD card. The game plays out the exact same way, and your choice is don't do shit! Or at least, that's what I thought. This time when Christina tries to look at the SD card, it's password locked, so she goes for another run, where I actually meet the mythical Jack. Jack is another mental patient friend of Emily's, and he warns you that young women have been disappearing for years because of a masked serial killer. This go-around, the ghost of Agnes does not exist and is not mentioned once, and instead I'm interrogating characters that weren't so much as mentioned my first go-around, investigating a serial killer. So, like, how did I get here? Every time you play the game, you basically get one of 2 movies. Either you get a crappy serial killer story, or you get a really crappy ghost story. And it took me forever to piece together how the game picks which one you get. In the scenes leading up to this point, you decide whether or not to rummage through Emily's room, whether or not to go for a run, whether or not to get out of bed when you hear a knock on the door, and you answer a few innocuous questions from the therapist about whether or not you believe in ghosts. And from these completely meaningless choices, the game somehow decides how the story is going to play out. This is like if the assignment that I got at work one day were decided by what sandwich I had for lunch. It's completely friggin' arbitrary. I did eventually put together at least a theory on how the game works, and trust me, it's a doozy. If you pause the game, it brings up a list of statistics. You have relationship meters for Charlotte and Jack, personality meters with 5 character traits, and coping meters of denial, acceptance, and guilt. And every single decision that you make, the game adjusts these meters like the whole game is judging your character. You want to know the secret? The only stats you care about are acceptance and denial. Guilt, I think, is impossible to fill because the game is garbage. The relationship meters don't do jack, and the character traits at best maybe slightly change the ending narration. If your denial is too high by the time you finish the first act of the game, it gives you the serial killer story, and if you haven't built up enough acceptance by the end of the game, you get a bad ending. The end result is that the game always plays out 99% the same each playthrough, and the only difference your choices make is the ending that you got based on some bullshit heavily disguised and abstract personality quiz. That is literally the full extent of your choices in this lame-ass, lazy-ass, dumb-ass, so-called interactive narrative. The narration that plays over the ending is the only thing that meaningfully changes. Because deciding to go for a run instead of hanging out with a friend is truly the gauge for whether or not you're healing from a tragedy, as is telling a therapist whether or not you believe in ghosts or what you think of your parents. The game thinks that it's some gigantic test of character when it's judging you on moon logic for completely innocuous adventure game decisions. It's all just so stupid. In the serial killer storyline, you investigate Emily's boss, a psychotic vet, and the Lord is a bad guy this time, and they're all in on it, using the serial killer as a cover for harvesting organs. And in this version, Emily hung herself because she thought it would suck less than getting kidnapped by them. Unlike the ghost storyline, it is actually possible to get killed. There are 3 or so different chase sequences where you die and get sent back because you failed a 50-50 completely random guess on where to go in an environment that you haven't explored. Charlotte and Christina get kidnapped. Oh, so that's why Christina has a head wound in the footage from the ghost storyline. But you break free and rescue Charlotte while the kidnappers die in a hilariously awful CG fire. But then Charlotte disappears and I get literally the exact same ending as my first run, only now the ending narration is talking about how Christina is paranoid, and this counts as having gotten another ending somehow. After you've beaten the game twice, you gain the ability to skip cutscenes that you've already seen, which is immensely helpful for looking for any story options you missed, but also drives home how lazy the editing is when I'm constantly making new decisions and getting repeat sequences anyway. Whilst experimenting to try and figure out how the game works, I redid my second run with no changes, apart from opting to fight the second henchman that shows up near the end. And this led to me getting a fake ending where Christina doesn't wake up from the therapy dream. It's the exact same ending as before, only now Charlotte's the narrator, and I'm wondering if Christina's therapist just let his patient will herself into a coma. And again, not having figured out the game's logic yet, I was baffled how a single completely meaningless change got me a different ending. What's funny is, to make sure that you know you got a fake ending, both Charlotte and Emily's ghost mock you for having missed so many important details.
I can't help feeling that there's more to all this than we know. We should go back and try and figure out what really happened.
There was so much more for you to find out.
No, you just failed a stupid-ass personality test. Also, another editing fail. When you go to rescue Charlotte, you can grab either a fire extinguisher or a beam of wood. And if you grab the extinguisher, you spontaneously have the beam of wood in between edits with no explanation. Then why did you even give us the option in the first place? Did you just want to film this actress getting beaten over the head again? Although granted, she does kind of look like Gina Serrano. Oh, and through trial and error, I found out it literally does not matter what you do in the abandoned hospital location. Even if you tell Christina to leave, she will have the exact same encounter with the ghost or murderer regardless. Why did they make a game that encourages so many replays when every replay further reveals how damn lazy the game is? I had to look up the final ending on YouTube. It's the ending you get for having such a low accepted score that the game ends without you visiting anybody's grave, real or fictional. They just replay the scene of Christina staring at hay, complete with the magical time-reversing car on the side. The problem is, it's so damn easy to get acceptance points for completely innocuous choices that you basically have to memorize a minefield to get all the endings so you can achieve completion. A game so messed up, the bad ending is harder to get. That's a new one. I Saw Black Clouds is a bad game. It pitches itself as an interactive movie with branching narratives, only to find out that your choices impact nothing except what narration plays over the ending cutscene. I've made this comparison before, but for real, this is just a movie that was badly edited into a video game to have the utter bare minimum of interactivity. And like usual, it's not a good movie. Most stories that use dreams as a narrative engine do so as an excuse to have abstract visuals or to enhance a story with symbolism, but the symbolism is rock stupid surface level in the serial killer story and flat ass wrong and meaningless in the ghost story. So we're left with a game that's telling us that it's about grief and guilt and how we process dark emotions, but ends up not having a single damn thing to say about its own topic. Is that better or worse than Erica, that pretends it's got something deep to say but never says anything whatsoever? I don't know. It's like if you assigned a term paper and Erica wrote an 11-page essay that just rambled on and on while never expressing an actual point, while Black Clouds wrote an introduction and then turned in a paper that's blank. Erica pissed me off, but I saw Black Clouds as so pathetic that I just kind of shrugged and moved on. I feel like this game didn't give me much material to work with for a video. What else could I do? Stupid game. Got me.